Hi, everyone. My name is Vince Gelman. Thank you for joining me today. I'm happy to be back in the forest. Forest. It's my little play on words. If you didn't see a video I put out a few months ago, I came up with that one myself. I come to the forest. So you can steal that one if you like. Oh, I love wordplay. So, what I want to talk about today is the power of our heart, the power of our holy heart, and that it's in our holy heart that the story of suffering ends. And this is the wisdom of heartbreak, the wisdom of bowing our head into our heartbreak and bowing our entire body while in our heartbreak into Mother Earth's waiting arms to really give ourselves to our heartbreak. Heartbreak really means break open, so it's actually a heart opening. But heartbreak, as you know, as I know, can be very painful. And so in some ways I think breaking is the right word because it can feel tremendously painful. For instance, if you have a breakup in a 5-year relationship or something like that, it can be tremendously painful in the heart to let that loved one go, who you've spent so many special moments with, intimate moments with. So why I'm creating this video is because with all that's going on in the world right now, I want to bring us back to our heart and to remind us all that it's in the heart that the story of tyranny and the story of suffering as a whole that has gone back a long time. It's in the heart that those stories end. That is actually the true place it ends. And yes, we do need to take certain actions. We need to be proactive. We do need to use our will in that sense. But ultimately, the story ends through our own surrender within to heartbreak. One of my favorite symbols, and I really don't like to call it a symbol, I'm just saying that right now because I want to lead you to a better word as I see it, but one of my favorite symbols is the Holy Cross. And I want to let you all know right now, in case you haven't figured this out already from my previous work, I'm not a Christian, although I do honor the Christian path as I honor all paths. I'm not a Christian, but I absolutely love Jesus. I love the teachings of Jesus, and I love the Holy Cross. The cross is such a mystical altar, and that's the word I prefer to use over symbol. It's much more than a symbol. It's a mystical altar that, like all altars, alters consciousness. It's a mystical altar that alters consciousness. That's what our altars do when we sit in front of them, or we pray in front of them, we cry in front of them. They're there to help us alter our consciousness. And so the cross for Jesus was an altar. He gave himself to his altar, and that altar altered his consciousness. It transfigured him. He went through his resurrection and into ascension because of the crucifixion that he went through on that altar. Another way of saying this is that the cross is a vehicle or portal through which we cross over, And so you can see how much I love to play with words. The altar that is the cross is the union of spiritual and worldly, of heaven and earth, of spirit and flesh. And we see that obviously with the two axes, the vertical plane and the horizontal plane, and they meet at the heart. They meet at the heart in what is called unio mystica. Unio mystica is where we go to end. It's where we go to end in the Holy Heart. So every time we give ourselves to our heartbreak through suffering, through pain and suffering, we end a little bit more, don't we? A little part of us dies. A little part of us is given to our heart, and that heart, if you can imagine, is like an alchemical fire, and that alchemical fire is at the center of the cross. And so when we suffer, when we bow in our suffering, and when we enter our heartbreak, a little part of us, or a large part of us, is offered to that alchemical fire that is at the center of the cross. We offer more of ourselves to this holy fire, and that fire alchemizes these old aspects of ourselves that we don't need anymore, and so we sacrifice them. That is really the true meaning of sacrifice. It's not so much a goat, it's sacrificing aspects of ourselves that we no longer need to keep, that never were true in the first place, such as it could be an old belief that we are not worthy. It could be an old story that we're not good enough. It could be an old fear, and we offer those aspects, those beliefs, those stories to the holy fire of alchemy that is in our heart. Our heart, more than any other part of our being, can hold the largest blaze. It's in our heart that we anchor most powerfully our higher self. And so we contribute to that fire through our sacrifice. And sacrifice is wedded to the word sacred. And so as we give ourselves to sacrifice, we open more and more fully to the sacred. What's also interesting is if you look at the word sacred, if you move the A and the C around, you flip them, you have the word scared. So what we can also say is that we sacrifice scared or fear for the sacred. We sacrifice what is not true, ultimately, for the sacred. Ultimately, what we're sacrificing is the false, illusional self, this story of little me that identifies with this body, that identifies with its roles, that identifies with its name, that identifies with the whole story. We sacrifice that self to our heartbreak, to that fire within our heartbreak, and we open to new higher levels of truth. So this is what we do through many, many lifetimes, through many lifetimes and many difficult experiences. And this is why pain and suffering are sacred paths. They're sacred rites of passage. And that's why we don't come here to avoid suffering. We don't come here just to be happy, happy, happy and live in love and light. We come in here we don't come here to even just have a bit of suffering and then get out of it. We may come here to experience suffering for a long time. We may choose a very difficult path of suffering so that we know it more intimately. We learn from it. And so that it breaks our heart. And that's one way to understand what Jesus' teaching was when he willingly gave himself to his altar. He gave himself to the cross, is that he showed the way of suffering. And through that suffering, he showed the way of transcendence. So what we have right now in this world is what I call a global crucifixion. A global crucifixion where the world is increasingly being pushed towards immense heartbreak through immense suffering. That's very easy to see. I don't need to detail that for you. You know that. And you also likely know that there's going to be tremendous suffering for countless souls on this planet when they realize what they've put in their body and when they realize what they have allowed to happen to their children, what's been placed in their little bodies. So, and that's just a couple of examples. There's going to be more reasons for people to feel shock and outrage and horror and disgust and fear and grief. And all of those, as difficult as they are obviously going to be heartbreaking. But they're going to also be very difficult. And yet I also will say sacred initiations into the heart, into heartbreak. And it is the nature of, let me put it this way, it simply is going to be for these people that is how they're going to wake up. They're going to wake up through heartbreak. And for so many on this planet, it has to be immense heartbreak because there is such immense resistance. There's such immense denial in them. And so they need strong medicine. They need strong reality. They need a strong, strong dose of reality. They need that truth, those painful truths. What's happened to their body, what's happened to their children, what's been going on in the world. They need those painful truths to break their heart open. You see, that's the thing about truth. Truth is strong medicine, because when we take truth to heart and we allow it to disturb us, well, then we experience heartbreak. So truth is in the heart, we say. Truth is in the heart. It is true. Truth is in the heart. It's not in the mind. It's not in the pineal gland. It's not in the psychic center. The psychic center of the pineal gland is an information center, but it's the heart. It's the heart ultimately that is the cardinal determiner of truth. You have information that comes to your psychic center, but your heart determines whether it's real or not, whether it's true or not, whether it's worthy of your attention or not. Your heart has final say. Your heart is the highest authority. And so truth is in the heart. And so when our brothers and sisters on this planet, our friends, our family, finally take truth to heart, because it's going to be forced upon them in increasing measure, it's going to break their heart open. And as I've said many times, and as I've written about many times, they're going to need significant support, healing support, emotional support, people who can sit with them and not say, I told you so, but I'm here for you, I'm here with you. So this will be their initiation to heartbreak, but in that, if they can move through the pain, it is their initiation into what's on the other side, which is heart opening to the light of truth, to higher truths beyond this planet. And so one way to understand this, or another way to understand this, is that think of, there's the truths of the world, the nefarious truths, but then there is higher truths. The first truth, the truths, the nefarious truths, the dark truths have a small t, but the higher truths that we're ultimately opening to, the light of truth, has a capital T. So small t, capital T. So we are awakening to higher truth, capital T truth, through lower t truth. It's through dark truth that we open up to the light of truth. In the same way that a seed must first be planted in the dark soil, and it must find its way through the dark soil to break through and pierce and blossom, and pierce that dark soil, pierce into the light of day and open up to the light. So it's through the darkness that flower finds its way to the light of higher truth. And it's through darkness here, through the dark truths, by taking them to heart, that we break our heart open and we open to higher truths. So this is a very sacred, very scary, very difficult rite of passage. But let us remember the word sacred, as difficult, as messy, as horrific as it is and will be for many people, particularly parents, who fall into the earlier category that I mentioned. So I invite you all to consider that we carry that cross wherever we go, because ultimately the cross is our body, our physical body. If you stand up, put your arms out, put your feet together, that's a cross. And at the center of that cross is your heart. And so when we give ourselves to our raw humanity, our vulnerability, our pain, our suffering, our grief, our anger, our disgust, we are giving ourselves to our body, we are giving ourselves to our cross, we are giving ourselves to our heartbreak, and we are giving ourselves thus to the center of the cross. And so we carry that cross wherever we go. And the more we give ourselves to our heartbreak, through our heroic journey of sacred suffering, of suffering well, as I like to say, the more we give ourselves to our heartbreak, and the more we die to the cross, to that fire of alchemy, the more we sacrifice all that we are not to that fire of alchemy in our heart, the more we end the story. We end the story of suffering. We end the story that is a suffering based on duality. Because really that's one way to understand the story of suffering, is that it's been a long-standing addiction to duality of us versus them. But the thing is that what the cross teaches us is that duality ends at the central point. Duality ends at unio mystica, at that convergent point of opposites. They collide into a beautiful, bright light, that fire, and there everything ends. The story of opposites dissolves. All fragmented pieces that make up the story, that make up me, dissolve in that fire. Everything ends at that ceremonial intersection of the heart, and everything begins. And yet, what begins never actually ended. So how do we end tyranny? How do we end this growing reign of totalitarianism on the planet? We end it through our heartbreak. We end it through our courageous heartbreak. We end it by giving ourselves to our cross, and thus our body, our heartbreak, our raw humanity, our vulnerability, and we stop pretending, right? Look at the word pretending. It means we're not tending yet. We stop pretending. We instead of pretending, we must tend. We must tend to the heart of the matter. We must tend to our heartbreak. We must tend to all that we have been running from and hiding from. We must stop pretending to be so strong when we feel weak. We must stop pretending that we got it all together when really what we need and what we want is to fall apart. We must give ourselves to our grief. We must give ourselves to our outrage. We must give ourselves to all the emotions that are calling for our attention now. We must turn to them as we would turn to a scared child, and tend to those emotions. Tend to those emotions. Put our arms around those emotions and hold them and bring them into our heart. And allow them to break our heart. Break our heart open to truth, the light of truth. That light of truth ends the story of shadows. That light of truth births the golden age that is upon us, that really makes it much harder for tyranny to exist on this planet, because the consciousness will be too high. It'll be too high. The dark ones will not be able to stay. They will not be able to do their business in the same way that Dracula must run for cover and under shelter when the moon comes up. So I offer this to you as an invitation to recognize that really it all ends in the heart. The story of suffering, the story of tyranny ends in our heart, in our courageous heartbreak, in our raw humanity, in our vulnerability that truly deserves our loving attention. So thank you all for listening and watching, and please share, subscribe, like, comment, all that stuff. Thank you. Take good care.